I'll just take you around the museum, then show you a movie. If you have time.
Plenty of time.
Okay. This museum, if you know, it's called the Haganah Museum. Haganah is defense. And it's also called the House of Eliyahu Golom. Eliyahu Golom used to live here. He was the chief commander of the Haganah, which was the basis of the Israeli army. And after he died in 45, his friends bought his house and gave it as a gift to the state of Israel, and it was expanded into the museum. And the reason the museum is part of the Army Museum is because it talks about all the organizations, all the undergrounds that brought to the founding of the Israeli army. Come up to me, please.
Was this one apartment? This whole thing was
No.
one?
And
which was this the original ceiling? That
that's all the
This is New Bedford.
Well, they just tore the whole thing down and put a new ceiling on.
the upstairs there's a model of the house before
This is all, but it goes around.
Come on, go upstairs.
Yeah, you're in the Army now. How long do you have? 2 years. Do you learn anything with that?
The Second World War. And then there was a new problem. Because the British fought the Germans in that war, and Jewish people here in the country wanted to help the British against the Germans. But they also wanted to fight the British against the white paper. And they didn't know what to do. So they decided...
What is your rank? What is your rank in the Haganah? Your rank?
What's right? I'm corporal.
Couple? And how long have you been in
In the army.
In the army, it's not the Haganah.
No,
The Israeli
9
army?
months.
9
Yeah.
months? And you work in the museum here?
Yes.
This is where you live in the barracks or you live at home?
No, I live alone.
And everybody in Israel goes into the army?
0 hour.
At what age?
18.
Is there anybody exempt? Anybody that does not go in because they're...
Orthodox girls don't have to go, religious girls, and if a girl gets married, she doesn't have to go.
Oh, really? And the girls are in how long?
2 years.
2 years, and the men?
3.
3 years. Are you in the reserves afterwards? For how long is that?
Girls until they're 24, and men until
The
they're
task force begins its withdrawal.
56. And do they have to go back each year for training? For how long?
It depends what job they have, what work, if they're fighters, or... Depends on what the army, how much the army needs, but it depends on if there's a wartime or whatever.
Do you get college training while you're there?
Most people get to university after they get out of the army.
So they're going right after high school?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
This retaliation was inflicted on the British.
That's just typical military film with a girl first. You know?
Porque voy bajo People were praying in the synagogue. Then, suddenly, strange whispers. A tap on the shoulder. Noise. Noise that didn't belong to the holy day.
כאן שידורי ישראל מירושלים. השעה 3:30 בין החדשות מפי אריה גולן. דובר צה"ל מוסר כי סמוך לשעה 2 פתחו בכוחות...
Call Israel, the voice of Israel. A voice that no one expected to hear that day. At 2 p.m., the armies of Egypt and Syria crossed the borders.
חילות אוויר עם מטוסי ישראל בגזרה הצפונית של קו הגבול עם סוריה.
They invaded Israel while our people were standing before the Lord.
כלומר לצד המצרי, אבל נהדפו והרדיו המצרי אומר כי הטבות נמשכו.
Once again, you don't think twice. You know where you have to go. From your home or your synagogue, you hit the road to your unit, to your second job. No time for thoughts about peace or war, just survival. It sounds almost silly till you get to the front. The air raid siren screams. You've heard it before. Still, you take no chances, not with your children. You head for the shelters. Israel is born. The Arabs refuse to accept the existence of the Jewish state. They penetrate the country in a coordinated attack to drive Israel into the sea. At the cost of 6,000 lives, a miracle if you wish, we push them back. On the basis of military reality, the armistice lines are drawn, but there is no peace. Arab guns zero in Israel's vital centers. From the vantage point of the Golan Heights, Syrians shell our settlements at will. Children learn to live in bunkers, a part of their curriculum. From military bases in the Sinai, Fedayeen strike at settlements throughout the south. Egypt closes the Suez Canal to ships of all flags bound for or coming from Israel. The Suez Canal, an international waterway. Egyptian warplanes are minutes away from Beersheba, Tel Aviv, and Jerusalem. Israel tries to break through the stranglehold. In a lightning campaign, our forces sweep through the Sinai and reach the canal. Under unbearable international pressure, we pull back, letting the Arab armies close in again. Slaughter, slaughter, slaughter the Zionists, and don't pity them. Nasser fires up the masses, feeding them hate. Drummed with his own words and the power of the Russians behind him, he builds up an illusion of conquest and extermination. Wipe Israel off the map. He blocks the Straits of Tiran and builds up forces in Sinai. The international community is morally and politically bankrupt. Israel stands alone. She has no choice. The victory in 1967 changes the face of the Middle East, but not the Arabs' goals. They become completely dependent on the Soviet Union and arm themselves for another war. They choose to ignore the possibility of peace. October 6, 1973. A surprise attack on the holiest of days. Egyptian forces cross the canal. Syrian troops storm through the Golan Heights.
They had done this following a preparation of some 3 years, a very meticulous preparation in which they were trained and prepared for this very moment by the Russians. The Russians connived with this operation. They introduced a tremendous amount of equipment into the area. approximately the same number of tanks as are in the whole of NATO, and the same number of airplanes as in the whole of NATO, faced Israel on both fronts on Yom Kippur Day. The battle opened under the best possible conditions that the Arabs could have chosen, with the full connivance and backing of the Russians, with the sea and air lifts ready to move at the moment that the forces moved, so that they could supply them, and with all the political backing that was necessary, A, in order to assure them that they could go on to victory should they be victorious, and B, in order to assure them that should anything go wrong, the battle would be stopped, the ceasefire would be dictated to the parties so as to save them.
1,400 Syrian tanks crossed the line in the Golan Heights. Tanks supported by all of the supplementary units and backed by the most advanced ground-to-air missile system. Iraqi forces join in. Jordanian units join in. A very small force of Israeli regulars is pitted against this concerted attack. Battles of incredible courage take place. In the south, thousands of troops cross the canal at 3 major points and hold their positions at 3 bridgeheads on the eastern bank. The Israeli forces are outnumbered by 12 to 1.
Small as it is, surrounded as it is by enemies, has decided to live. And if we have to pay the price for living, we have to pay it. This is not a people that can give in. And we know that giving up means death, means destruction of our sovereignty and physical destruction of our entire people. We will not be destroyed. We dare not be destroyed. Therefore the spirit of our men in the front, the spirit of our people in every home, in every city, in every village, is the spirit of a people that hates war, but knows that in order to live, it must win the war that has been forced upon it.
Children digging, working hard to fill sandbags. A song is born. Let it be, let it be. A people longing for peace. Children painting car headlights blue. No generation gap at this point. No time for whatever. All of the resources of the country are focused on one single thing: to keep alive, to win the war. $250 million is voluntarily contributed by the population. Civilian industry slows down. The army is the people of Israel, not just the soldiers on the front. The Air Force, working round the clock, takes over the role of the foot soldier, buying vital time on the ground. Then it goes back to its usual role of commanding the skies. The Navy also acts quickly. In the first missile-to-missile battles in the history of naval war, it almost completely destroys the Syrian Navy and seriously damages the Egyptian Navy. From the very beginning of the war, the Israeli Navy is in command of the sea. Meanwhile, the ground forces, as usual, do their job at a very high cost. This time, at a very high cost.
And a musician sometimes uses just the sound of music, a simple, quiet melody, to say a prayer in his way. The times now in Israel are not easy. The times ahead may be as difficult or maybe more, no one knows. But one thing you should know and believe, you are not alone. And though you have suffered your wounds yourselves, there is not a single Jew in any country in the world that at this second is not with you. And in all the other countries, whatever their governments may say or do, there are people who know what it means to fight for what they believe in and what is right.
I have to tell you that our regular forces, the Air Force, the Armor Unit, and other fighting units, put a stiff fight at the first stage, which is known as the heavy battle, as the heavy defense. And because of their standards, because of their spirit and fighting ability, we managed to stop the attack. We managed to stop the attack, and we managed to start the counterattack.
In the north, the Israeli forces, having been mobilized, move in to counterattack. The Syrian forces are driven out. The Israeli forces continue to break into the area of Syria and create the new Israeli advance on the road behind them approximately 800 destroyed tanks, more than half the total force they sent into action. In the south, the Israeli forces hold back the Egyptian attack, inflicting heavy losses on the enemy's armor. Approximately 250 of their tanks are destroyed. By means of a brilliant military move, they push west and south, reach the area of Arabia, and block the entire Third Army, cutting it off completely. The Israeli army now stands 50 miles from Cairo. Stand now. We stand in destroyed Egyptian villages on the western bank, among death and suffering on both sides, in an area that could have stayed alive, living peacefully with its neighbor across the canal. The Egyptians now hold a substantial part